One Friday, late afternoon, the prince went to go visit the white princess who lived in the White Dome. And when he was welcomed in, she fed him almonds that had been blanched and dipped in sugar. She gave him white tea to drink, and the Persian cat that was white purred and curled itself in and out from between their legs. Hello, Mark. Welcome. And as the evening progressed, the prince turned to the white princess, whom he loved, and you might like to know that he fell in love with her when he saw her portrait in a gallery many years ago. In fact, he'd seen 7 portraits of 7 princesses, and those were the 7 princesses that he'd invited to come to build domes in his garden. So he turned to her and he asked her to tell him a story because she was known as a wonderful storyteller. And she agreed to telling him a story. And after taking one long sip from her porcelain white teacup, she set it down and she began to tell him a story about her mother, who was a wonderful woman. All men are wolves. She was a lamb. And her mother, this one time, had been at a party, a great gathering. There was a great feast, and the table was laden with silver platters heaped with saffron, spiced rice, and there was fine meats and fruit cut up and vegetable platters. And this was a gathering of storytellers. And there was fine wine to drink, and there was beautiful music being played. And towards the end of the evening, when everybody had eaten their fill and drank their fill, all the storytellers in turn began to tell a story. And when they were all done, there was just one young woman left. It was the youngest of the storytellers, and she was like a willow. She swayed when she moved. When she got up, well, all of the other storytellers just fixed on her, and she began to tell her story. And her story was the story of a man who every day would go and visit his garden. He loved his garden. It was a beautiful, classical Persian garden, which means that it was laid out, cut in quadrants. There was pathways, there was wild trees, attention given to fruit and color and scent. There was birds in all of the trees. There was butterflies going from colored flower to colored flower. Every day, this man would go to his garden to take respite from all the work that he had put in the dusty streets of the city. Now, one Friday, he was so eager to get to his garden that he skipped his noonday prayers and he went in the heat of the afternoon to his garden. And he was walking along that path and he walked down that path along the wall. But the garden itself was surrounded by a high wall. In fact, you might be interested to know that the word paradise is the Farsi word, the language of Persia, for garden or enclosed space. So he was walking along the outside of the wall, and he turned the corner, and there was the gate. It was a beautiful wooden gate, fat wooden slats, or I don't know, beams, all laid out like that. And he stopped and he looked and he was like, because the gate was closed. And he never had that experience before. The gate had never been closed before. In fact, it was his garden, and he hadn't closed the gate. And because the gate was never closed, he didn't have a key. So there he was, standing outside of his garden, and he wanted in. And he couldn't get in. And to make matters worse, he could hear, he couldn't hear dancing, but he could hear singing and music coming from inside the garden. And when he looked up over the wall, he could see that the trees were swaying back and forth as if they were dancing. And he thought, hey, that's not okay. I really want to get in there, and I can't get in there because the gate is locked and I don't have the key. And so he was looking and looking and looking and exploring and exploring. And finally, right there, next to the gate, he could see a little chink. There was like a little hole in the wall. And he could look in. And that just made him want to get in that much more. So he started to dig away at that hole. And he was digging and digging and scratching away the dirt and the sand and the pebbles and the rocks until finally there was an opening that was big enough for his entire body to slip inside. And when he got inside, well, there were two women who were standing there guarding the gate. And when they saw him, this man, slip into the garden, well, don't you know that they picked up sticks and they started to beat him? Whack, 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 saying, "Who are you and what are you doing here and get out of our garden?" And he said, "Hey, who are you and what are you doing beating on me? This is my garden." And they said, "Ha, your garden? Prove it." And so he did. And he explained to them exactly where the tallest tree was and how the cypress lined the pathways and where the hydrangeas were and the flowers that smelled the best. And when they were satisfied, they believed him and they said, "We're really sorry for what we did. We didn't really want to beat you up quite so badly. And to make it up to you, maybe you would like to go and take a look at this party that's happening." Because see, in the center of the garden, there was this beautiful fountain. And close to the fountain, there was a water tower. And you could climb up that water tower and look down through a window at the fountain. And they said, "Come, all of the ladies, we're all there, we're all dancing, having a good time. And if you like, you could climb up into that water tower unknown to any of these ladies, and you could look down through that window. And if one of those ladies pleases you, well, it will be our pleasure to bring her to you." And the man thought, all right. So the two ladies led him to the tower, and he went up, and he pushed open the door, and he stepped into the room that had the window with the balcony from which you could look down into the fountain. And he crept to that window, and he looked down and out, and there, down there, he saw the most beautiful fountain and the most beautiful women. Some of the women were inside the fountain, already swimming with the fish. Some of the women were sunbathing, the drops of water drying like dew on their breasts. Some of the women were just slipping off their dresses to step in or play with the flowers that were floating there on the surface of the water. And the man thought to himself, "Boy, I'm supposed to try to choose between these magnificent forms? I don't think I can do it." And then, one woman who was sitting on the edge of the fountain, well, she picked up her harp and she began to play. And as she was playing, she began to sing. And for the man, it was fait accompli. He knew this was the woman that he wanted. And so he let it be known to those two other women, the guards, and they were like, "All right, let's go see what we can do." And they went down the tower, and they went, and they spoke to that woman who was sitting there on the edge of the fountain playing her harp. And she agreed. And so they brought her up the tower and left her there. They said, "We'll just leave you here to get to know each other." And they discreetly stepped out the door and closed it behind them.